Thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome. I want to carry on from where I left off last week, where I was speaking to you about I really want to say the difference between murder and a war crime, because we're talking about the war between Israel and Hamas. And last time I really focused on the fact that if we are on the side of the Palestinians, if we're on the side of those who chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, what we're actually calling for is the annihilation of the Jewish people, the removal of the Jewish people from the land of Israel. And in doing that, we're actually fighting against God. And what this comes down to is that the war that all the wars that have been fought against Israel from the very beginning, and particularly in the 20th century, from the War of Independence in 1948, which is when Israel became a nation, those wars are all because Israel is back in the land. And the whole war focuses around the war that started in the Garden of Eden. When Satan confronted Eve, and he said to Eve, "Did God really say you're not allowed to eat from any of the trees in the garden?" And she said, "No, he didn't." He said, and she got confused in trying to argue with or trying to explain to the serpent. And she said, "We can eat from the trees, but we're not allowed to eat the fruit that's in the middle of the tree that's in the middle of the garden, and we're not allowed to touch it, or we're going to die." And Satan said, "You'll not surely die." God knows that when you eat of it, you're just going to be like him, and you're going to know the difference between good and evil. And it was a direct contradiction of what God had said. And it says that when Eve saw that the fruit was good to eat and it was like pleasant to look at, and so on, she took some and she took a bite and she gave some to her husband who was with her. And so this was the whole thing. It came down to a question of the truthfulness of God. And that is the thing that has actually been the conflict in humanity from stopping us believing God ever since the Garden of Eden. Did God really say? Can you trust God? Can you believe him? And this is carried through. And we found that in the 600s, when Muhammad, who is the prophet of Islam, when he got the first revelation, and it was a vision, it was visions and so on, when he got the revelation that the Bible had been distorted by the Jewish people, and he got this whole new religion, he went first to the Jews and offered it to them, and I've mentioned this in a previous teaching. He tried to get them converted to his new religion, and they wouldn't get converted. And that was when his hatred of the Jews rose up. But in the Quran, it says that Muhammad is the prophet that has superseded every previous prophet, including Jesus, because they don't believe that Jesus is God. He was just a prophet. Even though he was a very good prophet, he was a prophet. But the Antichrist spirit, the Bible tells us, the Antichrist is he who says that Jesus is not the Son of God. And so this was the thing that came through in Muhammad's life, was that he said, this revelation that I've written down in the Quran is one that supersedes the Bible. It's the last revelation God brings. And I am the last prophet. I'm the last and the greatest prophet. And out of that, the nation of Islam was born. And the big thing about the teaching is that Jesus is not God. And their main hatred is towards the Saturday people, who are the Jews, and then the Sunday people, which is the Christians. And for all the Christians marching in support of Palestine, don't think that Christians will escape. If Islam succeeded in removing every Jew from the planet, the next people to be targeted would be the Christians. Because the aim of Islam is world domination. It is one of the quickest growing religions. In prisons, the prison gangs are actually converting many of the African Americans that are in prison in America, converting them to Islam. And so there's just this growth. And in other places where food and schooling is given for free, nothing is given for free, nothing. Because those people, in order to receive, have got to convert to Islam. They've got to start attending mosque. I was looking at a video just the other day of how this food was being given out. And here were these little girls, little African girls, 6, 7, 8 years old, with the headgear on already. And so nothing comes free. And because their aim is to bring the entire world under Sharia law. And again, I almost get beside myself when I see deluded people not even understanding what it is that they're calling for or what they're doing. And I saw a whole thing up on queers for Palestine. If anybody was homosexual and was in an Islamic country, their lives would be in danger. They've got freedom in Europe to conduct a homosexual lifestyle. They absolutely would not have that in Islamic countries. And so there are so many things like this. And what I'm aiming to do in these teachings is to really just show you what the truth is. And we've got to look historically, which is what we've done. But now I want to look quickly today at keys to the return of Jesus as King. And there's certain keys that we've got to look at. The first one is that Israel would need to become a nation again. The second is that Jerusalem be in Jewish hands and under Jewish control. Thirdly, that the nations of the world begin to unite against Israel. And fourthly, that Jerusalem becomes a cup that sends all nations reeling. Now, when Jesus was born, I nearly said born the first time. When Jesus was born, there were certain signs, and I taught on this at length, not online, but at his church, on the signs around the coming of Jesus that should have been an indicator to the Jewish leaders that it was time for the Messiah to be born. Because one of the things was that they were not going to be allowed to execute anybody. And 23 years before Jesus was born, the Roman government took away from Israel the right to execute. They were still allowed to give corporal punishment, which was the flogging that they could give to Jews, and there were other laws, but they could not execute. The right to capital punishment was taken away. The identity as the nation of Judah was taken away. Herod, their king, didn't even have any Jewish blood. And so as you went through, there were certain indicators that this was the time for the Messiah to be born. Now, in the same way, there's signs to look for about the end times. And I want to read to you in Zechariah, and you'll see exactly what I mean, because these are all the signs that we can look for when we look at the return of Jesus. And the return of Jesus is going to be something that instigates this thing where all wickedness in this world is going to be punished. Because people can think that they can get away with something now. But when God decides that it's time for him to actually take vengeance, he said, "Vengeance is mine," says the Lord, then nobody can stop him. And I just want to read from Zechariah chapter 2. It says in verse 3, "Then the angel who was speaking to me left." This is Zechariah in his vision. "And another angel came to meet him and said to him, 'Run, tell that young man, Jerusalem will be a city without walls because of the great number of men and livestock in it. And I myself will be a wall of fire around it, declares the Lord, and I will be its glory within it. Come, come.'" And then he goes on to call people back to the land of Israel. And he says here, "For this is what the Lord Almighty says. After he's honored me and has sent me against the nations that have plundered you, for whoever touches you touches the apple of God's eye. The apple of your eye is the pupil within it." So you touch Israel, you're actually poking your finger in God's eye, and God forbid that anybody should do that. He said, "I will surely raise my hand against them, so that their slaves will plunder them. Then you will know that the Lord Almighty has sent me. Shout and be glad, O daughter of Zion, for I am coming, and I will live among you, declares the Lord. Now we're talking here about the second coming of Jesus. Many among you will be joined with the Lord in that day and will become my people. I will live among you, and you will know that the Lord Almighty has sent me to you. The Lord will inherit Judah as his portion in the Holy Land and will again choose Jerusalem. Be still before the Lord, all mankind, because he has roused himself from his holy dwelling. And then if we look at Zechariah, it just gets more and more graphic about what the end times are going to look like. But I want to read in just a couple of verses in Zechariah 12 and then in Zechariah 14. This is the word of the Lord concerning Israel. The Lord who stretches out the heavens, who lays the foundation of the earth, and who forms the spirit of man within him, declares. Now listen to this. This was written thousands of years ago. He says, this is it. He says, I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. Judah will be besieged as well as Jerusalem. On that day, when all the nations of the earth are gathered against her, I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all the nations. All who try to move it will injure themselves. He also says, and the leaders of Judah will say in their hearts, the people of Jerusalem are strong because the Lord Almighty is their God. On that day I will make the leaders of Judah like a fire pot in a woodpile, like a flaming torch among sheaves. They will consume right and left all the surrounding peoples, but Jerusalem will remain intact in her place. Then I want to just look at chapter 14, just choosing one or two scriptures to read to you now. A day of the Lord is coming when your plunder will be divided among you. I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem. I will gather, says God, all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. And he talks about the city being captured, the houses ransacked, so etc. But it says, then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. On that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, forming a great valley, with half of the mountain moving north and half moving south. You will flee by my mountain valley, for it will extend to Azel. You will flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him. And it goes on to talk about living water flowing out of Jerusalem. And so what we see is that there's an escalation in warfare. But there's coming a time when the people think, okay, we're going to take Israel out. We are going to take out Jerusalem is going to be under Muslim rule. No more Jews are going to be here. And they do not even realize that they are being drawn into that place because it's the thing that will release the final battle where God actually deals with wickedness. And that on that day, it says there's going to be a day unlike any other, when there's no sun and there's no moon, and it's something where God actually establishes his rule in the earth once and for all. And so as I carry on through these weeks, I'm going to be dealing with little bits here and there that are very indicative to us, that the end is very, very close, and that for our own well-being, we and our churches need to stand on the side of Israel, be friends of Israel, because anybody who is a friend of Israel is blessed, and anybody who is an enemy of Israel is cursed. And I just want to finish up with this one, and it goes all the way back to Genesis, to Genesis chapter 12, when God first called Abraham. Well, he was Abram in those days, so God changed his name. But it says in the call of Abraham in Genesis 12, the Lord had said to Abraham, leave your country, your people and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse. And all nations or all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So if we bless the seed of Abraham, which is naturally, sort of in a natural sense, the seed he's speaking about is the seed of Isaac, who was the son of promise. So it's the seed of Abraham naturally and the seed of Abraham spiritually, which is those of us of the Gentile nations who have joined ourselves to the God of Israel. God bless you. I hope that this has opened your eyes to certain things.